Good morning, everyone. I'm Jonathan Little. Hope you're all having a fantastic day. Today is Monday, which means the office is a bit of a wreck. The office becomes sort of my storage unit on the weekends. And then on Monday, I come in here and there's a bit of a disaster. But that's okay. That's okay. We will make it work. Today was a hectic morning. Don't know why. Actually, I do know why. James leaves the house at 8:30. Whenever James is at the house, all eyes are on James, taking care of the baby. And inevitably, that requires me to not be able to sit down and prepare for this. So today we have a topic, GTO versus exploitative poker strategies. And I have written down, this is normally where all my notes go, I've written down nothing. So we'll wing it. We'll see how that goes. The reason we are doing this topic today is because today at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, we are having a free webinar for all of you. Let's call it a Veterans Day webinar for all the veterans out there and for anybody else who wants to attend. And it's going to be going through hands that Michael Acevedo played online and discussing all of the GTO implications that come from those. Oh, we see Michael in the Instagram chat. Good morning, Michael. Hope you're ready for the webinar. It's exciting. It's exciting. So, like I said, we're going to be winging it this morning due to a complete lack of preparation on my part, but here we go. So first things first, what is the GTO strategy? Well, in theory, there is one specific strategy that you can use all the time that will either break even or break even or win against your opponents. So they will either break even or lose. And that's fine and nice. And to be clear, I did not even recognize 5 years ago that was the exact definition of GTO poker, because it seems very, very silly to me to use a strategy that does not maximally exploit your opponents. Because if you do not deviate from the GTO strategy, you will leave money on the table, inevitably. We discussed this. Michael discusses this in his book, Modern Poker Theory. Here it is. It's a big book. I helped edit it and publish it. And Michael very clearly goes through exploitative strategies in this book, because while it is nice to have one fundamentally sound strategy you can fall back on, you also need to know how to adjust to what your opponents are doing incorrectly. Now, how much you adjust is always up for debate. You can use a strategy that adjusts very little, or you can use a strategy that adjusts a ton. And for all of you out there playing small and medium stakes poker against players who make really big errors, and you're aware of the errors that they make, and they're not going to adjust, you see we're kind of jumping through a few hoops here. If all of those things line up properly, you can make gigantic adjustments. The most obvious one is, say you're playing a 1-2 live cash game. Someone, let's say you raise from middle position, 4 people called, flop comes, let's say 9-7-3, and you have ace-9. Okay, 9-7-3. They check to you, you put out a bet, and then you get raised. Well, right here immediately, if your opponents are super nits, now I'm saying super nits, and you know they do not raise with draws, because a lot of small stakes players will not raise with draws. They will raise with literally ace-9 and better. So if they're going to raise exactly ace-9 and better, and you have ace-9, well, you're drawing nearly dead, right? So you should fold. Obviously, though, normally folding top pair is not such a good idea. So right there, you are maximally exploiting your opponents by making a relatively big fold. And to be fair, if you know that your opponents are raising ace-9 and better exactly, even a hand like pocket tens is kind of marginal, right? Are we talking about Hold'em today? Yes, we typically talk about no-limit Texas Hold'em. You don't think multi-way strategies apply, or GTO strategies apply multi-way. There's a program called Munker Solver. It is a relatively new program, not incredibly new, but relatively new, that figures out GTO strategies for multi-way. Now, again, as there are more and more people involved in the pot, you have the opportunity to make bigger and bigger adjustments. Is there such thing as a GTO strategy to adjust and exploit? Well, Matt, in theory, you can program anything to account for anything else. So if you take the solver and you input information for what you think your opponent's strategy is, which you can do, it's referred to as node locking, it will compute the optimal strategy against that, which is kind of what I always viewed like good GTO poker to be, which is apparently not the actual definition. I always presumed you were trying to adjust maximally to take advantage of whatever the opponent's doing correctly. And that turns out how basically all good players play. No one thinks, I'm going to study a GTO bot and play like a GTO bot all the time. And it especially doesn't work in scenarios where there are payout implications, like in tournaments, when you get deeper in tournaments. When they're like at the final table, very often you should not be playing anywhere near a GTO strategy. A good example of this is, let's say you have 9 big blinds at a final table. If you just use a push-fold chart, you are leaving so much money on the table. I mean, you're probably making gigantic errors. Because if you have 9 big blinds and everybody else has 4, you can actually shove really, really, really wide. If you have 9 big blinds and there's two big blind stacks and then a bunch of 20 big blind stacks, you need to be really, really tight. So the idea of, I'm just going to follow some strategy all the time without accounting for all the other things that go into poker does not make a whole lot of sense, right? Something else Michael talks about in this book, Modern Poker Theory. Someone asked how much this is. It's $40 list price. You can probably find it cheaper at Amazon, if I had to guess. Anyway, absolute value, in my opinion. Look, I had this book written because I wanted this book written. Fortunately, I'm in a scenario where I can now pay people money to make a great product and then share it with all of you. We're not greedy here. We try to share. Let's see. Where are we going with this? In the book, Michael talks about how you want to try to simplify the GTO strategy within reason to be implementable at the table. Good example of this is, let's say you're playing a 15 big blind stack. You can either go all in, you can min raise, or raise to 2.2 big blinds or whatever. You can limp, or you can fold. Okay? Those are 4 viable options, and the GTO strategy will probably use all those options some portion of the time. However, if you remove the limping option, especially from cutoff and earlier, you don't really lose much EV at all, and it makes your strategy way easier to actually implement in-game. And for those who are unaware, like what I mean by easier to implement, let me find a chart real quick. Let's take a look at this chart right here. You see this chart? This one right here. You see how there are multiple colors here, right? And you see some of the hands are split. For example, pocket 9s here it goes all in about a third of the time, it 3-bets about a third of the time, and it calls about a third of the time, okay? So you see, that kind of thing is very, very difficult to actually implement for us mere humans in the real world. So you want to try to simplify it. So instead of limping with a hand some tiny portion of the time, maybe instead you want to only raise or fold. Now, some people have taken this to the extreme, and they have shove-fold charts, but then they also have reshove or fold charts. And that's where you start making a big, big mistake. Because if you look at the vast majority of GTO strategies, even with a 15 big blind stack, they involve a lot of calling when someone raises. Very rarely are you just always all in or fold. And if you find that you are doing that, if you are just all in or fold when you have 15 or 25 big blind stack, you are messing up. I actually have implementable GTO charts over at pokercoaching.com under the tool section. Go check that out. They are there for members, and I don't know why you would not at least use those as a starting point. And I do want to make it clear. I think GTO strategies are incredibly useful, valid, applicable as a solid starting point, right? So from there, you need to adjust, right? According to a theory that someone proposed a long time ago, the best play comes from knowing your opponent's cards. Yeah, that's not how poker works, because you don't know your opponent's cards. Hate to break it to you. Usually, unless you're super using, you do not know your opponent's cards. So you have to make deductions about your opponent's range. Sabio, I'm just going to throw this out here. A lot of the content that was written 30 years ago about poker was overly simplistic. And I would definitely not suggest following that, given the tools and resources that we have today. So please keep that in mind. We're not playing in a game where your opponents show you their hand. So please keep that in mind. Dylan says, since joining Poker Coaching Premium, you're up $4,969 in 73 hours of 1-2. Wow, great job. Obviously running hot, but hey, good work. Good job, good work. Always glad to hear that. Like I said, I have no notes here. We're winging it. So, discussing GTO strategies, you are essentially trying to make sure that your opponent cannot do anything to take advantage of mistakes in your game, right? And by just playing the GTO strategy, you will naturally take advantage of whatever your opponents are doing wrong. And now people look at GTO strategies and they'll see that, let's say we're in a scenario on the river where we're supposed to call with 50% of our range, right? Let's say our opponent pots it, minimum defense frequency is 50%, we need to call 50% of our range. Okay, so our minimum defense frequency is 50% of our range. But what happens if our opponent just never bluffs? Well, what ends up happening is we end up paying them off poorly, let's say, whenever they are value betting. But think about all the times they don't value bet. We just get to realize our equity with all of our good hands, right? And take someone on the other extreme who goes all in as a bluff every single time on the river. Well, their bluffs are going to succeed, but whenever they get called, 50% of the time, they're going to get demolished, right? So, somewhere in there is the optimal strategy. And it turns out on the river, in a scenario where the opponent is polarized, meaning they have either a really good hand or a really bad hand, on the river, if they want to make a pot-sized bet, they want to have about 2/3 nut hands and 1/3 bluffs. Okay? That is how it ends up working. And then the opponent, in response, should call about 50% of the time. Now, the neat thing about poker in the real world is that usually with a decent amount of certainty, if the opponent is going to be calling way more than 50% of the time or way less than 50% of the time. So, if you know your opponent's going to call a lot, should you just play the GTO strategy? Take a second, think about it. If you know your opponent's going to call every time, should you just bet 2/3 nuts, 1/3 value if they're going to call every time? Well, the answer is obviously no, right? Because if they're going to call you every time, you need to not bluff anymore. Just stop bluffing. Because they're going to call you every time. Again, every time means you actually are correct with your reads. Oh, this is a whole other topic, but I have a study group where I have about 20 people submit hands each week, and we go through them. And I call on them. We talk in real time for about 15 minutes. And a few of the people there always presume they know exactly what their opponents do. And the neat thing about GTO strategies, or poker in general, is that if you know exactly what your opponent does, then it's just an easy game, right? It's like such an easy game. So then it's almost like they're asking me, really, how confident am I in my read on this player? And I don't know that. Therefore, it's important to realize that they're not coming with necessarily great, well-prepared questions, because you want to know how certain you are in your strategy, right? Sabio makes the mistake a lot of people do. He says, so GTO doesn't work against bad players. It's not what I said at all. I said it does not maximally exploit bad players. It does work against bad players because they are just losing equity to you every time they don't play the GTO strategy if you play the GTO strategy. So for most people, GTO isn't that useful. Very incorrect. You must start with a baseline strategy and then adjust from that accordingly. You can't just show up and click buttons and, you know what, this thing keeps... Does my chat box keep going black for all of you? I used to have Facebook running on the side, and I don't have it anymore. And it turns out I have to move my mouse every 5 minutes. Whatever, I can move my mouse every 5 minutes. Sorry about that. We get sidetracked whenever things all go black on the computer. I have a mild freak out. Essentially, what happens is you need to know how to adjust. And having the ability to, let's say, run a solver against someone who's really bad, usually it's going to give you a very, very different reply than if you presume your opponent plays well. Like I just said, right? Say your opponent always calls the river. Well, stop bluffing, right? The question is, what defines a bluff then? Do you know? And this is where, again, using a solver will help you see where the line is between a value bet hand and a check. For example, if your opponent's going to call every time, again, very hypothetical scenario, but like say the board is king, queen, 6, 4, 2. And your opponent has just put you on jack 10 for some reason, for a busted open-ended straight draw. In this scenario, if they're going to call you with any hand better than jack 10, they're going to call you with ace high, well, you should be value betting bottom pair. Should you value bet bottom pair? It's close, right? Because they're going to call you with every hand better than ace high too. So maybe it's not bottom pair. Maybe it's more like middle pair, whatever the board was, 6-2. So maybe like a 6 you're supposed to value bet. And then the question is, what size do you value bet, right? Solvers will help you with all of these things. And if you ignore all of that, you're just making gigantic blunders. Because what a lot of people do is they say, all right, my opponent's going to call me every time, so I'm only betting top pair and better. And that's just a substantial mistake. Like, you are leaving so much money on the table by doing that. So, without using a solver, I can guarantee you're not going to come up with exactly the right strategy against the parameters you put into, you assume about your opponents. Mark says you don't need a solver against someone with massive imbalances. I generally disagree. I think that it's very often obvious what to do against someone, but the question is, how far do you take it? Like, where is the line? And solvers will make it to where you can see the line. Our Galloway says, I have a problem on a poker coaching quiz. Send an email to support@pokercoaching.com. Right now I'm doing a web presentation. I cannot go in and edit the quizzes. So please send an email, support@pokercoaching.com, anytime you have any question and any issue. Also, tonight, we're having a completely free webinar for all of you. 4 p.m., we're going to call it a Veterans Day webinar, thanks to all the veterans out there, where we are going to be having a conversation with Michael Acevedo, the author of this amazing book. This might actually be my favorite book on poker. Definitely the favorite book I didn't write. And we're going to be going through some of his hands and discussing GTO concepts that come from that. So Sabio says, I think. Anytime you have to start a statement with I think, recognize that you could be wrong. It's very important to realize your thoughts do not trump math. So, keep that in mind. Your thoughts may sway the math, may change the math, but the idea of I'm going to ignore math because I feel like it does not make logical sense. And some people, well, let's talk about reads real quick. Let's say you're playing poker. We're Phil Hellmuth and we have very close to perfect reads. Okay. And I can look and tell my opponent has middle pair or worse. Okay? Some people may say, well, okay, it's an easy game then. Not necessarily. Are they going to call or are they going to fold, first off? So you need to have some idea of your opponent's strategy. And then also, you need to know if they have middle pair or worse, what is the strategy against a range that is middle pair or worse, right? You can't just guess. If you're just guessing, you're leaving money on the table. The neat thing is that guessing, someone wants to see this book, guessing is way easier to do than to actually study. It's on Instagram, so I have to put it up here. Modern Poker Theory, could not be an easier name, by Michael Acevedo. A lot of people don't want to do work, and they try to justify not doing work by saying, it's not useful for me. And then some people are wise enough to realize, I think it's not useful for me. Then some people are even more wise and realize, what I think does not matter. I think that's something that gives a lot of people problems. I mean, just talk to anyone. They think what they think matters. And what you think actually does not matter all that much. What matters is what actually is. So how do you find what actually is? That's difficult. You have to find experts who know what they are talking about, who have lots and lots of experience, who have proven that something works. And that's very, very important. Do I ever get tired of telling people they're wrong? I mean, look, it is what it is. Some things are just accurate. And it's important to realize I do not speak about things I do not know. I think a lot of people think that if someone's speaking on the internet, they must be speaking about everything as if they know everything. If you look at Twitter, Twitter is it's littered with poker players who think they know, like because they are good at poker, they think that information translates to something else, like religion or healthcare or politics or whatever, and it just doesn't, right? I recognize I do not know anything besides exactly poker and maybe marketing. So definitely keep that in mind. I'm not spewing nonsense as many people are. How many people use solvers during live play? A lot of the good players do. You ever play at high roller tournaments? They don't use it while they're at the table. Well, I'll tell you what they do. This is exactly what they do. I have watched these players. One of them made an app that shares it with all of you because it's actually that useful. He'd play a hand. He'd text the hand to someone because the best players in the world have people on the side who do the solving for them. I have someone who does the solving for me. I don't do it myself. And I text them, or they text them, and a minute later, he gets a solution back. So now he knows what he should have done in that scenario. It's quite powerful, right? So to say that in live poker people do not use solvers or do not have a use for solvers is ridiculous because poker is poker. This is a math game at the end of the day. It's a math game where you have to make assumptions based on the physicalities of the game, but if your assumptions are better than your opponent's assumptions, you'll make more money than your opponent's if you adjust appropriately. All right, let's see. What's the app? There's this app that lets you test yourself against the GTO bot, which I don't think is actually that applicable. It's called GTO. It's good. It's good if you're playing high stakes tournaments, that's for sure, because your opponents are going to play, or high stakes games, because your opponents are going to play. Your opponents are going to play relatively well. All right, let's see. Anything before the word "but" is rubbish. When is the webinar? 4 p.m. Eastern today. How do you access it? Well, first off, if you're not on my email list, perhaps you messed up already. And go to twitter.com/Jonathan Little. Can you share a hand where you use GTO? Tonight, we're going to be watching a webinar with Michael Acevedo at 4 p.m. He's going to be going through loads of hand histories where he plays GTO. I actually saw a hand history review by Michael Acevedo where he won some tournament playing no heads-up display, playing what he thought was very strictly GTO. He won the tournament. Go figure. And he's like no heads-up display, not reading opponents at all, playing loads of tables at a time. Just, I'm playing what I think to be GTO. And he told me he made 2 or 3 little errors and pointed them out. I think this was a mistake looking back. And yeah, you can just play straight GTO. It's not like a disaster or anything. Will this webinar be recorded? Yes, the webinar will be recorded for poker coaching members. Does GTO work better in cash or tournaments? We discussed this already. Remember how we said that GTO strategies work best when there are no payout implications. Because it's very easily accounted for in that scenario. And it's usually easier to know how your opponent's going to play when there are no payout implications. So it works great in the early and middle levels of tournaments. It works great in cash games. It will not work so great as you get deeper and deeper. That said, there are programs that tell you the GTO strategy based on certain parameters, like maybe you can only jam or fold or whatnot, like ICMizer, for example. ICMizer accounts for payout implications. Hold'em Resources Calculator does this as well, and it'll help you. You think Poker Snowy Bots have a very good win rate playing mid-stakes Zoom? Probably not. I think it'd have a tiny win rate. Nice Donnie Darko shirt. Is this a Donnie Darko shirt? So what else pertaining to GTO strategies? one thing worth mentioning that I was unaware of 5 or 6 years ago is that I knew the idea you want to have a polarized range, right? And whenever you get to the river, if you have a polarized range, you get to win the pot on the river if you tailor your bet size to the size of the pot, okay? We all know this, discussed very early in modern poker theory. And if your opponents play optimally in response, you do not get to bluff nearly as often because the optimal response to a GTO strategy involves playing the GTO strategy, which involves slow playing sometimes. One thing I typically do not recommend at pokercoaching.com is slow playing because people just pay off very, very poorly. People love to call. So one thing my strategy was missing for a long time was just slow plays against good players. But then, you know what started happening in high roller tournaments? I started getting check raised more on the river. And that's because the opponents went from playing nowhere near GTO to closer to GTO. In live poker, again, some people say, oh, it doesn't matter in live poker, but it does. Assuming your opponents are competent, right? You may say, well, what if your opponents are not competent? Even then, some of them will check raise you on the river. You better make sure you're prepared. And it's very important to recognize that if your opponents have some nut hands in their range, then your range is not actually polarized. And you may say, why? I have only nearly nut hands or nothing. It's because your opponent has some actual nut hands in your range. So when you bet with your nearly nut hands, you lose sometimes. So you're not really polarized, which means you have to have fewer bluffs than the GTO strategy against players who play the GTO strategy in response, which basically means they trap sometimes. So always be aware that when people are trapping some portion of the time, you must adjust a little bit. And if you are a poker coaching member, I know many of you are, we discuss there, again, implementable GTO strategies. They're not perfect, and very often they are adjusted to take live poker into account. If you just think back to the last homework challenge, right? In that scenario, we had a spot where I purposely said in a tournament, you need to deviate from GTO. And if you do not, you're making a mistake. Why are we deviating there? Because you want to make sure you don't go broke in tournaments when you have a medium stack. So, some people who follow just straight GTO there may actually make a little bit more money, a little bit more equity, a little bit more chip EV in that scenario, but they will not bring home the dollar EV, right? So it's very important to recognize when you want to be changing your strategy. What does adjust mean? Adjust means to change. I'm changing my strategy because of something else. What's the math behind betting 3x pot on the river? Depends on what your range is, right? Depends on what the opponent's strategy is, right? Plug it into the solver and you will see. How do you feel about Negreanu talking smack about GTO on his blog? So, Kevin, one thing I think a lot of people have, or is mental issues the right word? One thing I think people have problems with is that they think you must choose a side. You see some of the people on YouTube having nonsensical spats about GTO's better or exploitative is better. And the answer is very obviously playing fundamentally sound poker and adjusting from it to take advantage of what your opponents do wrong is what wins the money. It is literally what all of the best players in the world do. I mean, Negreanu is a good example of this, right? He purposely went and studied GTO a lot. He recognized that his skills were falling behind. I mean, I did the same thing. I recognized my skills were falling behind. So I want to make sure I remain a good poker player. So instead of just continuously doing what I was doing in the past that is no longer working great, you have to learn. Negreanu hired coaches. I hired coaches. And got better. And you get better by learning to play better. But again, if anyone thinks they are supposed to play exactly like a GTO robot, especially in a tournament, they are definitely making substantial errors, which is why it's important to adjust. When and where is my next tournament? I'm going to the Bahamas on Friday. They have the Party Poker Caribbean Poker Party. There's still time. I'm actually giving away 1% of my action to all of you. well, not 1% each, 1% total to whoever wins a giveaway. You can sign up for that at jonathanlittlepoker.com/pp giveaway. I'll type it right here. jonathanlittlepoker.com/pp giveaway for your chance to win 1% of my action in the Party Poker Caribbean Poker Party. Not just the main event, all the events I play. Because why not? We need to adjust and not take sides. I mean, I've never really been someone who cared about sides one way or the other. I just want to find what is right. Now, what is right? Right depends a lot on, well, some things are right based straight on math, right? And some things are right based on ethics. It's important to realize that you should probably just have good ethics. That way you're right in most people's eyes or everyone's eyes, besides like the most maniacal sociopaths. And it's always good to do good things. I've not always done good things in my life. I've done plenty of bad things, especially when I was young and dumb. But as you get older, you learn that it is very beneficial to just do the right thing. And also, like, I don't care if I'm wrong. If I am wrong, I'm trying to actually be wrong, right? I'm trying to look for spots where I am making mistakes in life, in poker, in relationships, and everything, so I can fix it and better myself, right? If you just want to think that you're great and think that you know everything, and you get offended when someone points out a flaw in you, how are you going to progress? How are you going to become better? A good way to fail is to stagnate, where you don't even change anything, right? This is especially true in poker. So many players from 2006 were crushing the game, winning $500,000 a year online, and now they can't beat any online game. And why is that? Well, it's because they stagnated, right? They did not spend time studying using the new tools that came out. They did not find good study groups who really cared about bettering themselves and the others around them. And it's highly, highly important that you continuously improving your skills, because if you don't, the people who are improving their skills will pass you by. They will. I mean, I witnessed this firsthand where some of my friends from back in the day, they are no longer in poker. Not voluntarily, it's because they essentially went broke, or they started losing a lot of money, so they quit. And you don't want to be like that, presuming you want to stick around in the game, right? And this happens in all games, in all industries. I mean, a beautiful example of this is like fast food dining, right? Take a look at what companies like McDonald's did to the fast food industry. I'm not a fan of McDonald's by any means, but they put loads and loads of companies that did not adapt out of business. Same thing with Walmart, right? They put loads and loads of mom and pop stores out of business by doing what? Well, doing everything the mom and pop stores did better, to the point that they were the obvious decision. It is very hard, by the way, to make people change behavior. And if you can get people to change from shopping at the mom and pop store where they love the owner to shopping at your store that has no real emotional connection, you have succeeded very, very well, right? Amazon's the same thing, right? And how do they do that? Well, they compete on a different spectrum. They're competing on price, and it turns out if you make the price low enough, people will buy there. So, with food, if you make the food good enough, people will buy there. Maybe not. McDonald's food's not the best. But you get what I'm saying, right? The companies that did not adjust, that did not change their strategies, they fail. Poker players who do not adjust, who do not change their strategies, fail, right? So, you must adjust. So, how do you adjust? A lot of people are always asking, like, how do I find what I'm doing wrong? You talk to people, you ask people, you take notes, you study away from the table. If you don't have a poker study group, get one. I mean, we have a Discord channel for the poker coaching members, right? Get on there. We have the forum for poker coaching members. Anyone, really, I think, can post on there. Get on there. Do it. And You need to make sure that you are doing everything within your power to get better, and one of those things is studying poker away from the table. Again, presuming you actually care about getting good at poker. I talk about this every once in a while, but there are 3 types of game players. They bleed into each other. But one, they make up about 90% of the poker playing field, primarily cares about the social interactions of the game. Okay? They just want to pass time, right? And this is the case for most games, okay? They don't actually care about becoming the best in the world. They don't actually care about bettering their skills. They care about passing time. Fine, there's nothing wrong with this. And this is how 90% of game players play roughly. Then you have something like 5 to 7% of players who want to push the boundaries of the game. They love running big bluffs. They love making big folds. They love doing all those sorts of things, right? And then the other 3% or so cares about winning. You may say, doesn't everyone care about winning? Actually, I had a discussion with this about Michael Acevedo in the book. Because he says right at the beginning, we have to make the presumption that players care about winning money. I'm like, I don't think that's necessarily true. Because we don't have to care about... everyone does not care about winning money. Right? So you need to be very, very aware of that thought process. Now, fortunately, as you move up to the higher levels of any game, inevitably those players really do start caring more about winning money or winning the game in general. That's just because the people who don't, they're always stuck in the small stakes games, right? If you're stuck in the small stakes poker game, you really need to look at your motivations, right? Your motivations very well may not be becoming the best poker player that you can be. Your motivations probably are social interactions. You want somewhere to go on Wednesday night for a few hours to pass some time. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. But recognize that if that is your goal, or at least your subconscious motivation, don't be annoyed, don't be pissed, don't be angry whenever you don't get the results that you think you deserve. Deserving is another idea that comes up a lot, where I don't really think anyone deserves anything in poker. You deserve to get your equity long term. Problem is, no one gets to the long term, or very few people get to the long term. And it turns out some of them eventually do. But most mere humans will not. Recognize that all you can do is show up and do your absolute best once it's time to go play. Before it's time to go play, study as much as you possibly can. Also realize you're in one long session. And even if you're failing now, you can write your course. The great thing about life is that you can always write your course. You do not have to continue doing what you did in the past. I think a lot of people get it in their heads that they cannot change, or that the changing is not even a realistic option. And change is possible, right? And sometimes change just happens naturally over time. Because I used to be very, very pessimistic, very, very stuck in my ways. I don't know why or how, but I was, right? This is when I was younger. And I did not have great ethics back in the day. I was not opposed to being well out of line. And I don't know why. Again, I don't know why. I don't know why I ended up being like this, or like that. But at some point in life, that changed. And I think it changed by, it's going to sound a little bit, well, maybe it's not cliche. It's cliche to me because everyone tells me the same thing. They started learning from others. I started listening to podcasts a lot, like 10 years ago, where I found people who were succeeding in life. And it turns out a lot of the people who succeed in life do relatively similar things. They are always trying to improve themselves. They have a positive outlook for the most part, with realism built in. And they always try to do right by others. If you add more value than you take, good things will come your way in the long run, pretty much no matter what. So, those things are very, very beneficial. And that means working hard to better yourself, not being closed-minded and thinking that you have to be right, and realizing that it's fine to be wrong as long as you are very, very quick to recognize that and right your ways. All right. How do we get on this topic? Let's see. If Poker Sony Bot could play against a real opponent, do you think they would have a very good win? We already discussed this. I already said yes. Oh, not a very good winner. I thought they would have a win rate. I thought they would not have a very good win rate. Anything that plays one specific strategy, is not going to have a very good win rate. It'll have a win rate, but it will not have a very good win rate, assuming it's very good. A little coffee, a lot of Adderall. I tried Adderall 2 times a long time ago. I did not like it at all. Somehow I'm on no drugs. Besides caffeine. Caffeine is a drug. I don't know if 1 cup of coffee a day actually counts as anything substantial, but it is very relevant. Is GTO the only way to beat CTO? No. In order to beat CTO, you have to understand the opponent is playing CTO. Then you can crush CTO. Mainly by just calling off with all bluff catchers. If your opponent's using CTO anywhere near reasonably, which most people who use CTO are not smart enough to do. Can you use poker tools while you are playing, or should they be used separately? Depends on what tools you mean. Not exactly sure what you mean. Yeah, don't forget alcohol. Alcohol's a drug. Yeah, I had a lot of alcohol, when was it? 3 or 4 or 5 days ago. I've had none since then. All right. You live in New York, you have to travel to New Jersey to play online. Just play small stakes because it's impossible for you to play every day. Look, if you're playing small stakes games, I don't see a problem with just playing on the random American sites with the idea that you will not, you're not going to get cashed out every once in a while. So I would, say you're playing small stakes for like $100, right? Take $100 and then put it on one of the sites that you know is kind of shady. Play there and cash out. Don't keep more than like $100 on there, assuming you're playing like $10 or $25 buying games. Is a book that has not been updated from 2008 by someone who has not played poker since that time outdated? Probably. Funny enough, I actually made my first poker book, Secrets of Professional Tournament Poker, to crush the players who were playing Harrington on Hold'em strategy. And it's because they were playing way too weak and tight. And sure, there are bluffs every once in a while, as weak, like decent weak type players do. And look, Dan Harrington's a fine poker player. I think I've only played with him once. Plays perfectly reasonably. But the strategy taught in that book and pretty much every book before that was way too weak, way too tight, and very based around beating people who just make horrible mistakes on a regular basis. And as time has progressed, people stop making horrible mistakes. What is CTO? CTO is crotch theory optimal, where you have your phone in your lap and you can look down and see your opponent's cards in real time. There's a guy named Mike Postel who had access to it. He certainly wasn't good at it, but he had access to it. Anyway, you can't beat that. You study poker coaching and play small stakes, which throws everything out the window. Bet sizing, etc. is stupid. What can you do? It doesn't throw everything out the window. There are many quizzes and homework challenges discussing small stakes play against like limp pots and all that, multi-way pots. And it definitely does not go out the window. I'm not sure why you think it goes out the window. Maybe you're saying that your opponents play very poorly. Great. Just maximally exploit them. Have I coached anyone who has defeated alcoholism or addiction and went on to move up in the game? I don't know. I have never coached anyone through those things because I am not a psychologist or psychiatrist. So I suppose the answer to that is no. I've never coached anyone through that. I have coached plenty of people who had problems in their past that they beat before they met me. So I guess I don't know if exactly what the question is, but no, I have never helped anyone through addiction. I've told people to stop playing poker. I do that probably 1 out of 10 students who come to me because they should stop playing poker. They are usually approaching poker in the mindset of a get-rich-quick game. If you cannot change someone's thought process to this is no longer a get-rich-quick game scheme, then they're going to have a tough time winning at poker. Because poker is a great way to get rich in the long term, not so good to get rich quick. Do I have any money on America's card room? Absolutely not. I think it would be highly, highly unethical for anyone to be promoting a site that very easily could take players' funds in the long run. All right. And to be fair, in today's world, I would probably only promote 3 poker sites because I know them to be relatively solid companies. That would be Party Poker, PokerStars, and 888. I think all of them do a fine job. They obviously do better in various ways. But I would absolutely not promote any site working within America, even if they are doing their absolute best to be 100% on the up and up. I just don't see a reason to give action to a company that has already voluntarily stated they are willing to break the rules that have been set out by the government. It doesn't seem wise, right? Going back to the ethics talk earlier, right? Just do what is right. And I've also seen plenty of poker players essentially ruined by promoting a site that they thought was doing right. Like, for example, take ACR, for example. I have no clue about their business practices at all, okay? Don't know what they're doing. But if they were to come to me, maybe they already have, spoiler, and say, we are willing to pay you a pretty decent sum of money to just promote our site, would you do it? And the answer is absolutely not. Because what has happened in the past is people have done this, site goes down, takes everyone's money, and then the pros are left looking horribly bad because they were promoting something that stole their their fans' money, right? I'm not trying to do anything to make all of you lose your hard-earned money. And the easiest way for me to screw all of you is to tell you to put your money in a site that could be doing wrong. And again, you never know if the company you're representing is 100% on the up and up, but it's not a good way to start off by breaking the rules right off the bat. What are my thoughts on PPP poker? Do they operate within the United States? The answer is yes. Don't put your money there. You all are sidetracking me a ton. All right, let's see. What's the solid strategy to beat the small stakes games? Play fundamentally sound and then adjust accordingly. Chris Moorman talks about that in his book. Haha. Yeah. Right? This guy took a big reputation hit for lock poker. Yeah, lock poker was particularly awful because they let players deposit for a long time and then just never paid them back. Okay. Watch out, Boyski. What is a Boyski? Is the Lexi Gavin webinar only available for Poker Coaching Premium members? No, it's available for all Poker Coaching members as far as I know. Poker Snowy isn't real GTO, right? No, it's not. But it's something around it because it played against itself until equilibrium. What are my thoughts on it? I think it's a good program to use to study. And, I mean, I've used Poker Snowy a lot. I actually had some videos, my last few episodes of Weekly Poker Hand, where I went through... what did I go through? I played a bunch of hands on Poker Snowy against the bots, and then I went through the interesting hands where either it said I made a mistake or I would voluntarily make a mistake that I thought people would make, and then showed how Poker Snowy can analyze those scenarios and give you advice for how to play better. So you can find that at... Where can you find that? YouTube.com/pokercoaching. Go check that out. You're playing a live tournament with 1,000 big blinds. Play implied odds hands and realize 9-7 suited is not great if you make a flush and someone wants to put in 1,000 big blinds. Does ACR pay out? As far as I know, ACR pays out. Most of the sites that operate within America that can still be promoted by American players or players in general are paying out. That's the thing, right? They are good until they're not. And almost every site that's ever operated within America has failed. Just keep that in mind. And I'm sure none of them came into the industry thinking, we are going to go and defraud our players. That's not what they think, right? And a lot of crimes don't happen that way. They're crimes of opportunity, or they're crimes out of quote-unquote necessity. And most of them do not start off as, we're going to make a business to try to screw everybody. But whenever the government shuts off deposit means, they shut off cash out means, They stop getting customers at the rate they think they're going to get them. A lot of things can happen bad to a business, especially ones that spend lots of money. Especially ones that spend lots of money trying to get customers, like poker sites inevitably have to do. It is worth mentioning, I talked to my lawyer, Mac Verstandig, about for the legal ramifications of promoting various sites that do operate within America, and he said, Jonathan, you would be an absolute fool to promote any site that operates within America, assuming you want to be sure that they're not going to, the government of America is not going to come after your money or perhaps put you in prison. And I don't want trouble with the government. And I also don't want them to take my money, and I don't want to go to jail. Not that I think they're going to go to jail very often at all, but, and also, to be fair, I'm not trying to screw all of you. Simple as that, right? I value my fans. It is not my goal in life to ruin all of you. And I have been around the block enough times to see that things that you may not think can ruin your following actually can ruin your following. Good example of this, there was a well-known YouTube video blogger who put out content saying that you should put 50% of your money into cryptocurrency at the peak. I had a few people, for a while, they would. I got the same email like 100 times from different people over the course of a month when crypto was going down, and they're like, I listened to insert this person's name. They said put half your money in crypto. Put half of my money in crypto. I had, let's say, $10,000. Now I have $3,000, even though I've been winning at poker. What did I do wrong? I'm like, well, you put half your money in an asset that is highly volatile. Now, highly volatile stuff goes up sometimes. It goes down sometimes. But you want to keep your risk of ruin low in exchange for fewer potential profits, right? I mean, to be fair, you could just go and take your bankroll every day, whatever you win, and put it on number 33 on the roulette table. And it's there, it's active, you could spike, but you're probably not. And I'm not saying crypto is like roulette at all. I have some cryptocurrencies, but I'm certainly don't have half my money in crypto, and I think that's a very, very substantial mistake. Mark has a very good example here. I doubt Full Tilt intended to shaft people, but we saw what happened. Yeah. Same thing with Ultimate Bets. Same thing with Absolute Poker. Same thing with Lock Poker. Same thing with Cake Poker. Same thing with, insert all the names, right? None of them start off looking to screw people. But the ones that are not very legal and regulated are live to screw people. All right, I have to go. I have a meeting. Someone asked why I was dressed up, because I have a meeting. I have to be professional. Have a great day. Enjoy yourselves. Work hard to better yourselves and others. You're going to find that whenever you help others, whenever you provide value to others, life will start to go a little bit more splendidly for you. Have a great day. Good luck in your games. Remember, I have a webinar today, 4 p.m. Eastern Time. You can find a link for that at twitter.com/Jonathan Little. I will be discussing mini poker hands with the GTO expert, author of this amazing book, my favorite book on poker, Modern Poker Theory. So, check it out. Good luck. Have fun. And I will see you all at 4 p.m. today. Bye-bye.